we actually have a few updates here that are definitely worth talking about with some fantasy implications. But also, like, football's right around the corner. I mean, it's just fun to talk about some of these roster moves. I think some of the question marks that we've been dealing with in our draft process are starting to clear up a little bit. So that's all stuff we plan on touching base on. I noticed we got a couple follows since our last stream, so thank you, FIFAnator04 and Football Absurdity. We do appreciate that. If you're new to the stream, if you're watching on YouTube, and you like what we're doing, or you want to catch us, whenever we do go live or post new content, definitely hit that follow button. Hit the subscribe if you're on YouTube. Stick with us. I think we've got a lot of good content, a lot of strong opinions that could help you. Even if it's just one or two that you pick from it, like they could help you with your fantasy team. So definitely appreciate your attention. But let's get started.
Yeah, so we've got a lot of, well, not a lot. We've got a few things that have happened today that I'm interested in talking about, but probably the biggest one is going to be Cam Newton. So you want to lead off with that?
Yeah. So Cam Newton got cut, and I think we could all agree that Cam Newton's quarterback play hasn't been great for a couple of years, but I think the cut itself is surprising. I guess the real question right now, there's a couple things that stand out to me. One, what do you think that offense looks like with Mac Jones? Is he the real deal? Is Cam Newton just that? Has Cam Newton just been that bad? And then two, like, where do you think Cam Newton might end up? Can he help a team? Can he make a difference somewhere else? Um, I mean, at the very least, I think he could still be like a Taysom Hill kind of guy, and we've seen how effective that can be for the Saints. So, like, if he goes to the right situation on a good team with a coordinator that would be willing to build a few things around his running ability, like that could be really interesting to me too.
It could be, but the my first thought when you said that was that's what the Patriots just tried to do last year, and it just didn't work. But also, it seemed like he had no shoulder to throw with. So I don't know. I mean, to be honest, I thought he looked better this preseason. I don't know how much of him you caught, but I thought he looked fine. I was I was surprised. I was very surprised that this happened. I wasn't surprised that Mac Jones was a starter, but like these guys were competing in what seemed like a very close competition this entire preseason. Even though I thought Mac Jones looked good enough to start, I was thinking in my head like, they'll give it to the vet and then they'll ease the rookie in at some point. So I guess I say that to say like I think Cam Newton is going to find like a spot on another team. The Cowboys have been mentioned. That seems kind of weird to me because it's been known that Cam Newton does not want to be a backup. Like I think he's even been vocal about that. So when I saw that news, the first thought I had was, what's going on with Dak? Like is Dak okay? Because they said he is, but is he really? I don't understand. But to get back real quick to like just the Patriots, um, how I think this impacts New England. The very first thought I had is probably the most obvious one, but it was the Damien Harris role. Cam Newton had, I think I saw the stat today, it was like 19 rushes inside the 5 yard line last year. Definitely don't expect that to be the case with Mac Jones. So my thought was, is there going to be more touchdown opportunity on the ground for the running backs at this point? And, obviously with Damien Harris, he's going somewhere in like, I don't know, seventh, eighth round range, I think, right now. He's not going to be the pass catching down back. But if he even has the opportunity to see a few more looks at the goal line, I just think I don't know how that doesn't boost him up a little bit more than he already was going to be. You know what I mean?
Yeah, Cam, I agree that I think Cam looked better as a passer this year. I think he looked like he was playing a little less safe than what we saw last year in New England. I think his lack of effectiveness for what I might picture another team using him as was because they didn't have the complementary throwing threat. I mean, obviously, when you put one guy on the field, you want to be less predictable. You don't want the team to know what you're doing necessarily. So like him being able to throw is still a factor.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, Cam Newton not being in New England helps Damian Harris. Cam Newton not being in New England could help some of these receivers. Jacoby Myers. N'Keal Harry's still in trade rumors, but this might give him another opportunity. Somebody that I think more than a couple people still have some hopes in him being an effective player. And they have these two tight ends. So I mean, Damian Harris's arrow has been going up. Like they're running two
Yeah,
tight
slowly
ends with
for a while.
yeah, like I mean, Hunter Henry, Johnny Smith are going to be on the field a lot, especially with the receivers that the Patriots don't have. So like that's an uptick. Cam Newton not taking red zone touches, that's an uptick. So like wherever you thought Damian Harris was, you need to at this point probably bump him up I would say around, like roughly around in your fantasy draft.
Yeah, it might be fair to say around, yeah. The other thing, if we're talking about the running backs real quick though, if James White, it seems like he's probably still going to be the third down back, the pass catching down back. Mac Jones, I saw a lot of short passes. It's not like he was afraid to go downfield. He did when it made sense, but I saw a lot of short throws. Like he's willing to do the dump offs. That kind of sparked my interest in James White again a little bit. I'm still probably not drafting the guy, but if you're in a full PPR league and you go like receiver heavy, maybe you take a tight end at quarterback, and you're just looking at those running backs at the bottom, he would be somebody that would stick out to me with Mac Jones. More interesting. I think as I'm talking about it out loud, I think I am a little more interested in all of New England now, just because all I could keep thinking of is what I saw last year with Cam Newton, and I was so afraid that if you were to buy into any of those guys, that you could potentially be signing up for that again. And now I don't feel that way anymore. I think probably the guy that I would be targeting from the wide receiver group is still Jacoby Myers for sure. That's probably the first one that's going, and maybe the only one that's being drafted. Aguilar's there too, right? I don't I don't
Aguilar
know.
is there.
Yeah, so I don't know what that's going to mean. I don't know if that affects Jacoby Myers or not, but the little bit we've seen in preseason, that's not been the case. It's still been Jacoby Myers. So for me, it would be like I'd be willing to take Damien Harris, and like you said, it might be around sooner than what it has been. I'd be okay with that, especially if you are running back needy towards the end of the drafts or even like in those middle rounds, I guess. I'd definitely be willing to do that. James White in full PPR towards the end of drafts, I would be more interested in now. And maybe Jacoby Myers is someone you could draft. I think he's still going pretty late, like 12th, 13th round. If you feel like if you need receivers at the end, you could do worse. I guess I'll put it that way.
Well, and if you go like no tight end set option for your draft, there Hunter Henry and Janu Smith will be available. I think that the rankings guys aren't willing to commit to putting either of those guys or both of those guys in starter territory, and I get it. Um, However, like Josh McDaniels is still there. He was there when they were running Gronk and Aaron Hernandez. Definitely different players, but I think there's a lot of room for two tight ends to produce. I think when you get that far down the list, a, like a tight end 10 isn't that hard to obtain. I'm leaning Hunter Henry. So, like, if I go no tight end, I think I'm okay with walking away with Hunter Henry. Part of that is also being that you can find a replacement. I think there are a few guys that could have a year. So, like, I'm not saying like draft him and ride him out for the whole year, but I'm saying it. I think if you go no tight end, you don't grab one early or at all till the last few rounds. Like those two guys are gonna be there, and I would pick probably Henry over Smith just because I think he's the more clear receiving threat, and I think he gets a slight bump too from Mac Jones. But interesting,
Yeah, well,
interesting element for the Patriots for me is that this is probably the most clear cut that the Patriots backfield has been in years. Like Rex Burkhead was that
mhm.
annoying guy the last 2 3 years, and he's gone. I know Cam's been itching to say it, so go ahead.
What, James White?
No,
I'm
who
sorry.
who else is missing from the Patriots backfield?
Missing from the Sony Michelle.
Yeah.
Dude, I like that guy.
So Sony
Well,
Michelle's
here's the
gone.
thing.
I mean, you essentially
I,
might have two guys right now in New England's backfield. And when's the last time we've been able to say that?
it's possible, except the Sony Michelle trade. could say just as much about what they think about the rookie, the Ramondre Stevenson. He has looked good in preseason. It could like like I said, I would draft Damian Harris, but I would have this thing in the back of my mind that it's possible that Stevenson is more involved than we anticipate, and maybe that's right from the jump, or maybe that's not until we're a few weeks into the season. But it's something to be mindful of. Like
Maybe
he is also a power back.
maybe he's the guy that if they're going up against a smaller defense, they do a little LeGarrette Blount game. Like maybe
Yeah,
he
it's
gets a
possible. But
game
then
here
my
and
thing
there.
is like, isn't that Damian Harris? Like, isn't that what he's supposed to be? Because he's very clearly just a first and second down back. And so like these two guys are similar in that regard, except Stevenson can catch the ball a little bit too. He's the dark horse of this group that wasn't getting drafted before. I haven't checked his ADP. I'm guessing he's probably one of those guys that people are taking flyers on at the end of drafts now. And that's just somebody to think about.
I mean, where are you putting him? Like on your radar?
Yeah, exactly. Like if you're in a 10 team league, like if you're in a shallow league, you're probably not drafting him. But if you're in a 12 team league or more, I think you're probably putting him on the end of your bench. That's where I would be at with it. Because it's just what I've seen in preseason with him. I was like he kind of stood out to me. Like I remember having the preseason game on, and he was out there, had a few nice carries. I'm like, who was this dude? And so I'm sitting here paying more attention, paying more attention. Next week, he kind of did the same thing. He showed out a little bit again. Then you see Sony Michel get traded, and I don't know. Like, does that mean because they're definitely full on committed to Damian Harris and James White? Maybe, or maybe it's because they really like this other kid too.
Yeah,
And Michelle was starting to show like he's wearing down,
yeah,
in my opinion.
yeah. And I mean, if Stevenson is like they have him listed on, so we are using. I mean, it's not like something we're avoiding talking about. NBC Sports Edge is what we're using for a reference today. That's what we have in our main panel. We're just gonna like skim through these articles, give you guys some stuff to look at. Um, they they have Stevenson listed as a goal line back, so he's not on their running back depth chart on there. Take that for what you might.
Really?
But if he's the goal line back, then that might if that's a role that he earns, then you might have to scale back, like give a little tiny bump back down for like a Harris because maybe some of those Cam Newton red zone touches go to Stevenson. So we'll just kind of see how that plays out. But
Yep.
until we know that that's a thing, I think you're giving Harris that uptick. I think you're giving James White that uptick, and like you can point at 30 running backs in a fantasy draft right now that you're like something could happen in the first few weeks that could change this.
Yeah, I think the right way to put it is like don't overreact to that possibility by not just writing Damian Harris off your board. It's just something to be mindful of and pay attention to from week one.
Oh
If you're a
yeah,
Damian Harris owner and you see Stevenson getting some work, like I would just take note of that. And you're going to have guys on the end of your bench anyway that are going to essentially be burners. Like they're essentially going to be guys that you can just drop and pick up as you please.
yeah.
So it's just something to pay attention to. Don't overreact to the news, but just
But it
have it in your back,
prepares you
in the back
to
of your mind.
yeah, it prepares you to make the appropriate reaction if Stevenson starts gaining some traction. So it's like
Exactly.
you first, if you consider both things as a possibility, Harris being a workhorse and or Stevenson getting some reps later on, then you're in a position to draft Harris where other people might be overlooking him in case he does end up being the guy long term. But you're also going to be a little more sensitive to some of those touches that Stevenson gets, and you have another chance to be. You could be the with this information, you could be the first guy to get Harris and the first guy to get Stevenson when it's time later on, week 2, week 3. Like it's a win-win. We're like just keep an eye on it. Use that as an opportunity to react if things do change a little bit. Um, I have an interesting idea on where Cam Newton might end up. I kind of want to hear
Okay.
Cam. Why do you think he should go to Dallas? Because that seems to be the main report right now.
Oh man, Cam Newton in Dallas. I don't really see a need for it unless, like Josh said, there's something a lot more serious behind the scenes going on with Dak than they're really telling us. I don't really see why Dallas would even want a Cam Newton. But again, that's just personal preference. Um, yeah, I mean, I don't know. It doesn't even seem like the right fit necessarily. But
No, my thing with that is the only thing to me is because, like I said, I'm pretty sure Cam has been open about not wanting to be a backup, and I think that could also be part of the reason why the Patriots released him once they decided Mac Jones was going to be the starter. I can understand why Dallas would want him, just because
they don't have a backup.
we saw
too.
what happened when Dak was hurt last year. It was a total disaster, and so
Dallas
like
is
they want
afraid.
to avoid that. Yeah, they want to avoid that. So it would make sense. But if Cam, I guess the part where it doesn't make sense to me is if Cam then decides to go there, either that means like he felt he maybe didn't have many other options potentially, or, and this is the more unlikely, or there's a little more concern about Dak's health than they're leading on. That's how I feel about it.
Right.
Well, Cam was in the same situation last year, and then he took like a $1 million deal. It was like him and Jameis Winston were being paid less than backups around the league. So like he didn't want to take a back seat last year, and then the way free agency played out and the longer he sat, he ended up taking an opportunity to compete in New England. And he ended up being the guy and getting some time. But part of me kind of wonders like maybe he would like to be the starter, but is he in another position to just accept that maybe that's not what he's going to be able to do? My thought on where he might end up that could be most interesting to me, but also be a bummer for fantasy, is a Panthers reunion. Because they went and they got Sam Darnold, and last year they had Teddy Bridgewater, and it's partially because of the way that Bridgewater played out. This Darnold thing kind of feels the same way to me now, and it might not be fair to Sam Darnold, but it's like I think they're looking for solutions in the wrong places. I think they're looking at guys that have had opportunities and maybe not done as much as they could have with them. But Cam Newton was very good for them. He won an MVP with them. So there's a little bit of like a relationship there. But like if he went there, I would be pretty bummed for their receivers. I would like really dislike it for fantasy. But if I were guessing right now, I think there is a chance that Cam Newton could play quarterback for the Panthers this year, and I think it's somewhere where he would be comfortable, and that would probably be where my gut is leaning right now.
So the only thing I would say about that is it's a different coach. You have Ron Rivera that was there, Cam was his dude, and now he's in Washington. Ron Rivera's actually already been asked about Cam Newton since this happened, and I think his quote was something along the lines of, "It popped on my desk" or something like that, or "I'm aware of it" or whatever, something like that. But Ryan Fitzpatrick is our starter, so take that for what it is. Now you have Matt Rule in Carolina, so I don't know. It seems like Matt Rule's the one making the decisions over there in Carolina, not the ownership, not like the front office. So that would be my stipulation there. Is I don't know if, because it's a different coaching system now. I'm sure Cam Newton would probably just feel comfortable just the fact that it's in the same city where he played for so long, and he knows a lot of those players. But the coaching would be the only thing about it that would probably surprise me.
He profiles as that would be Cam's level of interest. He profiles as the types of quarterbacks that Carolina has been trying to poach and try to build up, like the Bridgewater, like the Darnold. So like for me, Carolina's interest would be more Cam Newton's current profile. The Washington thing's a great point. Cam Newton, when the Carolina team kind of disassembled, like Greg Olsen left too, like the older veteran guys that had been good for them for a while kind of felt like they were getting pushed out of town, and Ron Rivera was the guy saying like, no, like we're OGs, like we want to keep this together. Those are my guys. So like, yeah,
Right.
Ron Rivera, he was a team guy, or he was a man of the players. So totally agree with that. And Washington is kind of in a situation to consider that too.
I think so because we know that Ryan Fitzpatrick, that shit can go south as quick as a Jameis Winston can go south. Like there could be 3 games in a row of multiple turnovers with a team that has some expectation with Washington. Like they've got some expectation this year. And and then if you would have a Cam Newton to turn to, I don't know if he would be better or not, but I would like I think they would probably like that option, especially if you're Ron Rivera, right? Like I'm sure he likes Cam Newton. So if Cam Newton was willing to accept a backup role to start the season, that would make sense to me.
Yeah, yeah, it's
Got
definitely
Curtis
a
Samuel over there now,
former Panther.
former Panther with Rivera. Just saying.
It would definitely be interesting. Washington's defense is good enough, and they have the skill players too that
Mhm.
like they should probably be in like more of a win now mode. And typically, when you have a hole, you would be trying to fill that with veterans. That way, you're not going through learning curves and ups and downs. So, like, I could see that.
Yeah.
Um, it would be interesting to me. I still kind of feel like Cam Newton would be best used by most teams as like a Taysom Hill package kind of thing. Now, whether or not he'd be willing to accept that is a totally different story. But like, if you added that element to a Washington, that could be pretty crazy.
Interesting because, like you said, that defense is pretty stout.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
what do you got next on the docket here?
Well, so we just talked about Damian Harris. We've got Damian Williams on the docket. Um,
Oh, right.
there is, I think, for us internally, I don't know that you'll find it many other places. There is a growing interest in what Damian Williams ends up doing in Chicago, and there was an update today that was
Mm-hmm.
probably more of an official change than really like an expectation change. But you gave me an update that affects him.
Yeah, I mean Tariq Cohen. I don't think it's really that much of a surprise, but it's official now that he was placed on the physically unable to perform list. So he's out minimum 6 games, and honestly, won't be surprised if it's longer than that. This could be another year. I don't know what the hell's going on with Tariq Cohen. And Damian Williams is there now. He's going to be Montgomery's backup, quote backup. He's going to be the number 2 on the team. But Damian Williams does profile a I don't know if you want to call him like a pure pass catching back because I don't feel like that's accurate. But he's a very capable back doing that. And there has already been reports of the Bears. I think Nagy's even came out and talked about it that they think Williams can do that. What Tariq Cohen did to an extent. The thing is, I can also see Damian Williams getting more carries too. I could see him not just being exclusively a third down back. So I don't know how much fantasy value there really is going to be at the end of the day with him. But if you were into the idea of Tariq Cohen, which there was a time when he was, especially in full PPR, he was very relevant, then I think there should be at least some interest in Damian Williams late in drafts, especially if you're in a deeper league, because he is going to see the field. And then how much do you believe in David Montgomery? Some people love him, some people don't feel that strongly about him. I don't think this backfield is just like as clear and cut and dry as people want to believe it is. So I just think it's worth mentioning that Damian Williams is going to have some opportunity, and then what he does with that is kind of what remains to be seen.
If you use a late round flyer or you stash Damian Williams, he's a player you owe some patience to. He was not hurt, which is a good thing, but he did opt out. So he hasn't played football in a year. Or wait,
Mm-hmm.
yeah. So he
Yeah, you're
hasn't
right.
played football in a year. I think that that's going to be a 2 to 4 week kind of a shaking the rust off situation. So I mean, if you don't see what you're looking for in 2 weeks, I'm not worried about it. But I would like to see by weeks 3 or 4, I would like to see the usage go up. I would like to see maybe some averages go up if the usage doesn't, and just kind of keep an eye out for him to be getting better. There are some reports even here I'm scrolling through that he has impressed as a receiver, so that does definitely buy him a role in the offense. So yeah, I would just be
I think
patient
so.
if you do stash him. See if just look for him to get better over time. Um, and definitely
Well,
you're
and this also just sorry, just this also comes from my view. I'm just still, even though Montgomery had as far as production goes, he had a strong finish to the season last year. I'm just not totally sold on him as being a complete three down workhorse type back, which is I feel like he's being viewed that way in fantasy drafts. And I'm not going to be at all surprised if that's not the case, even so much to the point that we see a lot more Damian Williams on the field than anyone is expecting.
oh yeah, I mean
So,
this is way more under the radar than it probably should be because this kid was good. He was good enough that when the Chiefs traded up to get Clyde Edwards-Helaire and took him as the first running back ahead of two or three guys that were ranked higher on the what Kuiper McShay like draft prospect list, like Helaire was farther down. The Chiefs really wanted him, but Damian Williams was still good enough that like we were kind of holding our expectations to a certain point until he opted out. It was like at that moment when Damian Williams opted out that we were like, oh my God, Clyde Edwards-Helaire could be huge. So
yeah, I mean, obviously there's a difference in the offenses there, right? Like the expectation. That's why Clyde was drafted so high last year. But it's just funny that just last year, this time last year, before the opt out with Damian Williams, like Damian Williams still had a lot of relevance in
oh yeah,
fantasy. And then he opted out. Like you said, he didn't even get hurt. He opted out, went to a team that's not as exciting on the offensive side of the ball. And now everybody's just like, who? Damian who?
yeah.
you know.
I mean, if you don't want to say who it was, like we don't have to do that. But there was a guy in our fantasy league
So
that actually chose to keep Damian Williams all the way up until like the draft
I don't
pick.
even remember.
Steve.
Was it?
Steve was planning on keeping Damian Williams until it unfolded. So that might have been the Edwards-Helaire pick. It might have been the opt out. I don't recall that part specifically, but like he was
hmm
keeping Damian Williams. So
Yeah.
three keeper league. Somebody that is fantasy competent decided he was worthy of that. I mean, I just think the guy's got deserves a little more respect for sure. Um,
Right.
we got some other things that might not be as relevant on a week to week thing, but definitely things we should be keeping an eye on. I think the biggest one that I have here out of the next few things I wrote down was the uncertainty with Saquon Barkley still. So
Yeah.
they're saying he might not be good to go for week one. I have personally noticed that Devontae Booker has gotten a lot of run as a number two in the preseason, and I think he's looked quite good in that role. So if there's any inclination that this injury with Barkley could linger, and you think you might be able to get a few weeks, 3-4 weeks out of Devontae Booker, I mean the dude's got some momentum right now. He's looking pretty good, and I mean like there's some value. There's a lot of value there in
Well,
throwing
this
him in your
kind of
flex and taking a couple wins that you might not have had otherwise.
this kind of leads me to a question. So, like you yourself, you're saying you from what you've seen from Booker, it's your opinion that so a hypothetical situation. Say we get to our draft, which is right before the season starts, and there's still no clarity on a Saquon Barkley, and it's just a regular redraft league. You have whatever. You have a pick where Saquon falls to you. All the other running backs, the big name running backs, are gone. Would you still be willing to take Saquon, just knowing that you're also going to take Booker at the end of your draft because he's not going to cost you anything anyway, and then let that situation play out and just make sure you have somebody until Saquon is for sure playing? Or does it make you so nervous that you would just write off Saquon off your board altogether and just go with maybe a receiver at that point, someone that you feel is safer?
Well, so the first part of that for me is that if there's uncertainty and there's a lack of commitment to Saquon Barkley's injury timeline, if they're not giving specific timelines confidently, which
Yeah.
happens a lot, um, I think Booker ends up bumping up to like where Ronald Jones was in the draft when it felt disrespectful. I think Ronald Jones has come up some, but I think if we don't know when Barkley's going to play, we have definitely seen those things linger way longer than we thought they would. They definitely want to see Barkley get healthy, and if they have someone that they feel any amount of confidence in, I could see them being a little more patient with him too. So I think that Booker, you would have to make it a point to get Booker if that were the case.
Mm-hmm.
But if you're looking at it as like you're drafting a team, I mean, some teams have already been drafted, but if you have yet to do your draft and you're looking at Barkley early in the draft, I mean, you're one of the tougher decisions right now for I'm assuming for most people would be like, do you take Barkley or like Kamara? For me, it's easy. It's Kamara. If you know that Barkley's not playing week one, go Kamara. I might be picking the next guy or two ahead of him too, which would be like what Zeke and um, I can't think of. There'd be like one more that I'd be like, okay, I'm probably taking this guy
Well,
over Barkley too, but specifically
standard
if
leagues, guys like Chubb start to creep up in standard leagues. You start getting into half and full PPRs, and those guys drop to the second round. But
true, Derrick Henry would be. I think is
Derrick
the other
Henry,
guy I
yeah.
was thinking of. Like I'm for sure taking Derrick Henry over Barkley if Barkley's not starting. But there's a very subtle difference in what you're looking for in this too, and that's the timeline. Like if they're saying a timeline but it's vague or it's like a broad window, then they don't know. So like if it comes out and they're like, well, Barkley could be playing in by week by sometime between weeks 2 and 6, like you're panicking if you're a Barkley owner and you're staying away from him if you don't have him. Like don't sign up for that. If they're saying, hey, it's a minor thing, he'll be back by week 2, and it's like that clean and cut and dry, then like draft him where you want to, maybe bump him down a spot or two, but definitely pay
I think
attention
what's
to the
gonna
word choice when they start updating you.
I think what's gonna happen because so many people are drafting this week, and so many people are going to have a draft before they get to know, like before they get any better vibe out of New York with Saquon. But you know what his upside is. So it's just that's such a difficult spot to be in. I've asked myself that, like would you just go down to the next running back down? But like what if you're someone that really believes in Saquon? You're probably just still taking him then if you really believe in him and you think he's going to be back sooner rather than later, even if it's not week 1. And and then that's the only reason why I asked because you talked about Booker. Like I feel like it would go without saying at that point then you should get him at some point on the end of your bench towards or make sure you don't miss out on him. Throw him on your team so at least you have a fill in if needed. you know,
Yeah, for sure.
Especially for someone like you who like you said you've watched him and you think that he could actually be productive if he's filling in for Saquon for any amount of time.
Well, the first so let's be honest, the first couple weeks up to a month some years of fantasy football are wild. Some things are going to happen that you don't really expect. Some guys are going to put up some numbers that they are like not going to duplicate throughout the year. But in a season long format or in a half a season length, like I think Devontae Booker's like fringe RB1 if he's the guy. So like
Really?
I think I do. I think that you got to consider the fact that he looked really good last year filling in for Josh Jacobs. He's got some momentum in the preseason. It's a thing where if the Giants stay true to their identity, which I think might have been implied that they want to do more of by getting
Like they
Booker
don't yeah, like they don't like they're not going to adjust their playbook just because Saquon's not in is what you mean by that.
with Booker. Yeah, I think that they might
Right.
not have felt like that was something they could do with like Gallman or some of the other guys they've had Freeman. So like
Right.
yeah, I think that Booker allows them to stay true to their identity. I think Booker's capable of doing that in short stretches. And so, like, yeah, if you draft Saquon Barkley in the early to mid first round, like, go get Booker, hedge that. But also, I think, feel comfortable putting Booker in there as a starter. I mean, I don't think if you want to go like two running backs and load up on other positions for the draft, I think you could feel comfortable doing that if you're making sure you get Booker later.
Okay.
Probably not as
Fair
much
enough.
value for Booker when Barkley's healthy. You could probably dump him at that point once Barkley starts looking good, but like if Booker's the guy, I think he's startable very easily.
All right.
Man, that guy's just had so many injuries.
I know. Well, that's why I was in the when you said like you could let Booker go or whatever after Saquon comes back. First thought of my mind is like, don't do that.
Probably don't want to. You probably don't want
No.
to. I've just invested in injuries enough to where it's like I'm kind of out on investing in it happening.
I hear you. It's not a fun game to play either. I know if I'm in a redraft league, as much as I love Saquon, I'm one of those guys that's either I'm going to look at the next running back down on my personal board and decide if I want to reach on that guy if I think it's a reach, or the more likely situation is, let me just take this receiver. Give me a little Tyreek.
Yeah, little Devontae Adams.
Yeah, and then when it comes back down on the swing, like if a Chubb's still sitting there or something like that, I would much rather just have that situation.
Kind of going off the script here, but I just said Devontae Adams, and as I said it, it reminded me. David Bakhtiari is missing 6 weeks. He's on the
I
pup
saw
list
that.
too.
Mm-hmm.
That's going to have an impact on the Packers offense. He's a very good tackle.
Very good. I wouldn't be all that concerned if I was an Adams owner, just because dude gets open at will, and I think the Packers are smart enough. Rodgers and him are smart enough. If they needed to adjust, hypothetically, he has less time to throw. I think they can adjust for that. It might be more concerning for the running backs. I don't even know if it's that concerning for Aaron Jones, to be honest, because he's such a versatile back. But a lot of people are really AJ Dillon fans, and like this dude is just a straight bruiser. He'd be somebody that I would question in that situation. But you're right. The team as a whole, you have to. It's just another one of those things to consider too, because he is so good. So
Well,
good.
I agree that I think that the effect on the skill players will be distributed. That's a good enough team and a well run team that can kind of distribute some of those losses. Get the ball out quick. They added Cobb for the slot, which should help with some shorter routes and finding pockets and zones. Um, I think the biggest hit is Aaron Rodgers. I think that if everyone
Yeah, me
takes a
too.
little hit, the biggest hit would probably be Rodgers. But I don't
Yeah.
know. I mean, it's hard to. There will be an impact. I guess the extent is just kind of worth monitoring.
Well, there probably would. It would have to have a negative impact on him, right? It would just have to. Last year was the first year we saw where Rodgers really didn't run as much as he used to. Not that he was incapable, he just didn't do it. Maybe partly because he just really didn't need to that much. But when you've got less time, which he will have less time, he's more likely to have to roll out of the pocket and scramble. And what have we seen like several years out of the last 5 or so? Rodgers getting hurt when he runs more.
Yeah.
That'd be rough.
Even
As a
when
Bears fan,
Rodgers
I hope that doesn't happen.
even when Rodgers was in some of his like primetime years, I've seen some games where too much pressure really affected him. So it'll be interesting. I think it's going to be more of a week to week situation. There's definitely going to be teams that you probably won't notice a big difference, and then there's going to be some teams that might have a couple guys that can fly off the edge where this team could look a lot different than we've seen the last
I,
couple years.
I just can't wait till like that third sack in a row where we get that close up zoom in Rodgers' face and he's fucking pissed. That's what I'm looking forward to.
Screaming at his fill in
Oh,
tackle.
hating them all. Hating them all.
Man, I mean, describing it like that has me having flashbacks to old Cutler in Chicago.
Oh, man. I don't think that guy liked anybody.
we've got we've got a couple other things here that are interesting. Chris Herndon, which affects somebody you've been interested in
Mm.
drafting later.
Oh, God. So salty about that, by the way. Irv Smith, Minnesota. So Minnesota traded for Chris Herndon, tight end from the Jets. That someone who at one point in time people were pretty excited about, and then he had a lot of injuries. Things just didn't really work out for him. I don't know what that guy is today. If I'm being honest, I really don't know what Chris Herndon is today. If he is what people thought he was a couple years ago, I don't know. Like I'm not drafting him. I wouldn't recommend anyone draft him, but it is someone you can just. It's another one of those like, just don't forget about it. Watch for it and see if it means anything. Honestly, what I took away from it was more concern that this is more long term than short term for Irv Smith, which is it just bums me out, dude. It bums me out. I wasn't alone in thinking that he was a one of those tight end sleepers this year. He was there was rumblings and he was starting to get talked about more and more as we were getting closer and closer here to the regular season. But he was still being drafted as something like the tight end 13, I think, like 11 to 13, somewhere in that range. One of those situations where if you punt the tight end position, like I do a lot, this was one of those flyers that I think was worth it. And then in the last preseason game, which apparently I don't know if he got hurt in that preseason game. I don't know if they've said that, if it was in that game or if it was in practice afterwards. But their first drive or first two drives, they made it a point to get him the ball, and he looked athletic, looked fast. He was getting open. Like I was watching it going, oh yeah, this is happening this year. And man, I was so bummed when I saw that he got hurt. So really my takeaway from that news, the Chris Herndon news, was I just wanted to bring it up because, like I said, there a couple years back, Chris Herndon had a lot of hype. I won't be drafting him. I just took away from it more than anything that this might be more long term for Irv Smith, which is a bummer.
I think that's logical. I mean, if you see a team go sign a guy at a position where somebody's had a recent injury, I think that's usually bad news for the injured player. One thing that's interesting to me, or that has my mind kind of processing, is personally, which doesn't mean anything for NFL GMs or anything like that, but personally, I would think that the price tag for Chris Herndon would have been similar to the kid from Cleveland that got buried when they signed Hooper, that Joku, David Njoku.
David Njoku.
So, do you think that the price tag was higher for Njoku, or do you think that it's easier to push Herndon into like a secondary role if Irv Smith does come back? I guess like kind of how would you process that?
Yeah, I mean, if you were saying that, maybe guys like that were available on the market, because who knows, right? Who knows if they tried to pursue someone else?
Right.
I will say they did, like Herndon, they didn't pay a lot for. I think it was a 4th round pick, and was that it? 4th round and a 6th round, or maybe that was the exchange and draft picks.
They gave up a 4th and they got Herndon and a 6th back, so they basically moved back two rounds.
Yeah, and I think it's even actually technically I think that 4th round pick was the end of the 4th, and that 6th round pick was at the front of the 6th.
Okay.
So it's not like they paid a lot for it, and maybe you could argue that because that's the case, maybe they are thinking Irv's going to be out for a month, roughly, if hypothetical, and they're not trying to go out and really make a huge splash play on somebody else because of that. And if that's the case, that would just make me think and I would believe it because of the little bit I saw in preseason with him. I really think he is part of the game plan this year, Irv Smith. I really think he was a real part of their play calling, their scheme plays that they had. Like there was things designed for him to be the first read. And if that's true and they've been focusing on that, it would make sense if they were like, okay, we don't really have another guy on right now on the team that could do that, but we want to kind of we don't want to steer away from that because Irv's going to be back soon and we like these plays or these schemes or whatever. So let's go get somebody on the cheap. Like maybe that's the case.
But someone that you feel could still let you run what you've been working on. I mean, it could be like another Booker thing.
Right. It could. It could
Like,
be.
hey, we know
And if
that
that's the
you're
case,
a capable receiver, and we would like to continue doing what we've been instilling all off season.
right, that's possible. I mean, we're still waiting on the Irv Smith news, how long he's going to be out. If he's out 6 weeks, like I don't think you can draft him. I don't think he's draftable then, but I would want to add him, especially if he had an IR spot. I would want to add him and just hold him because if it's one of those injuries where he can come back and there's not going to be any lingering issues, I think he could still be a second half of the year guy who could potentially be. I mean, outside of a few tight ends, how many of them are really reliable on a weekly basis? Not like no one. So it's just one of those positions. If you punt it, I'm not going to totally forget about him. I'm kind of just waiting on the news.
Could be a potential replacement if you do end up with like a Hunter Henry and it doesn't pan out. Maybe Jonnu Smith looks
Right.
more involved, and then it's like, oh well, we got Irv Smith coming back, and he could be a real deal.
Right.
Definitely interesting. What else do we got? We've got Jordan Howard got cut. That's somebody that was pretty relevant for a while and kind of seems to be fading a bit. Um, man, I think that the Eagles in general are becoming the place where running backs go to die. Like it's the running back graveyard over there, and it started with Jay
Running
Ajayi.
backs or everyone.
Well, it's like Jay Ajayi was pretty good. There were some rumors going into his Eagles career that like
Wow, that's a guy I forgot about.
he had the knee issues, but like that's where it starts for me. And then it's like, okay, well, we're gonna just keep signing guys, and LeGarrette Blount went there, and that was it. And Jordan Howard's now cut. Um, I think we're both on the same page with this, but do you think he finds traction anywhere?
I don't know. I mean, this is kind of the same thing we were talking about before we started streaming about Devonta Freeman. These backs that are always at towards the end of their careers, I guess they bounce around team to team. They get cut here, they get cut there. Usually, those guys they just never come back. But there is a team like the Ravens who just lost Dobbins, and maybe they're totally fine going into the season with who they have. I know there's a little bit of hype about is it Taysom Williams? They're now new running back two that they've listed as on the depth chart as their running back two, not Justice Hill. So maybe they're cool going in with that. But do you think that's a possibility? Do you think he could go somewhere like that? Do you think it doesn't even make sense because he's sort of just what Gus Edwards already is?
I think that the Ravens would be one of the more likely places for Howard to go because I don't think that the Ravens have big plans on making any of their running backs receiving threats. I think that there are a lot more teams that like the idea of dumping off to their running back than they actually like making it a point to do so.
Actually implementing it instead of just talking about it.
Exactly. I mean, we've seen a little bit with like Mark Ingram when he was there the last couple years, and I thought he handled it pretty well. But yeah, I think that if there's a team that Jordan Howard would fit into without having to be someone that he's not,
Yeah.
Baltimore would be one of my top picks for that. Um, I don't know how much he's got left, and I think there might still be
Right.
some better options for them out there. But I think for Jordan Howard, Baltimore would be one of the better fits.
Yeah. It's just something that comes to mind quick like right away because of that being recent news and then the Dobbins thing being recent news and knowing that he is like you just said he's not a pass catcher, never has been. He's more of that power back and like you're talking about what Baltimore likes to do.
Yeah,
My like I said, my hesitation with that would be well, two things probably. One, like you said, how much does this guy really have left? But two, kind of feels like they already have that guy over there in Baltimore, with Gus Edwards.
yeah,
So if they do actually want to have backs catching the ball like they've talked about, if they actually try to implement that, that's not going to be Gus Edwards, and that's not going to be Jordan Howard if they hypothetically were to bring a guy like that in. But they have that on their roster with like a Justice Hill. So, like I said, they might just be totally fine going into the season with what they've got at this point. If they really mean what they say and wanting to throw to the backs more, well, then you've got that guy. So, and if
Where
you bring Jordan Howard in, I feel like that just makes it weird, you know?
Jordan Howard would, I don't know how much he's got in the tank because Philly's running back room has been crowded for years too. So I mean, like it's a little bit hard to decipher how much of it is like talent or how much he's got left versus opportunity sometimes. But I could see Jordan Howard filling the exact role that the Ravens were happy with Alex Collins running for 2 years. Like they didn't ask for him to do any receiving. I think that Jordan Howard is a very north-south runner, a very decisive like this is where I need to be and I'm going to do that kind of a thing. So yeah, I think that his running style beyond just not being a receiver could work there too. One thing that I was keeping an eye on for that Ravens backfield was Latavius Murray. So sometimes it's more about the news you don't see. We didn't see Latavius Murray get cut, so he's a saint. You mentioned Devontae Freeman. He did get cut. So, I mean, he's available too. He's somebody that could fill that role or catch on somewhere else potentially. But a week ago, Latavius Murray was probably my favorite to fill that role in Baltimore, and now he's locked up.
Yeah. Yeah, and you could see like I won't be surprised to see Devonta Freeman working out for teams. That might be that guy's new career, for all we know. Work out for teams. Maybe one of them signs him, and then he's out in 3 weeks. Kind of feels unfortunate. Like that's that guy's. Man, that's unfortunate. Just an aside. That dude was so fun to watch in his Atlanta days.
I know.
He was an absolute, like he was good at everything, but he was just a physical bruiser. Like there's no wonder why the guy got hurt. With the way he ran. But man, was it fun to watch.
It was kind of an interesting progression for him too because I felt like he started out being a lot more elusive, and then like the last couple years in Atlanta, I felt like he was always willing to do it, but I felt like the last couple years in Atlanta, he was like, the way you described it, and it really started standing out to me afterwards was like he would get the ball and he would just run a straight line as hard as he could into the one defender that was supposed to tackle him.
It was like, maybe I could get around you, but I just want to hurt you.
Yeah,
That's
like
how it felt like he was running.
and there was no hesitation, like no let up.
Mm-mm.
It was 100 mile an hour.
Yep. Yep, foot to the floor as soon as I get this ball.
There's going to be a hole here, and you're going to have one guy there, and I want that.
Yeah.
It was
a lot
wild.
of fun to watch. Not the smartest career choice.
No. Bouncing off of the kind of still sticking into the Ravens backfield situation because it is still a pretty relevant situation to monitor. Latavius Murray being locked up has me paying a lot more attention to the Houston Texans running back room. They did not cut any of the 3 names that they have right now, and I think that there's too much going on there for what the team's expectations should be this year. So they have Mark Ingram, who is reportedly locked in for the favorite to get first and second down work. They have David Johnson still there, and they also have Phillip Lindsay, who doesn't seem to have a clear role, but is still there and is expected to be involved while he is there. So that's pretty interesting to me when you look at a team that has low expectations that's rostering 3 running backs that could help other teams.
It's an absolute mess. It's an absolute mess, and I want nothing to do with it. I mean, this could certainly be one of those where somebody's relevant, and you shouldn't just write them off because you don't want to think about it and deal with it, but that is exactly where I'm at. I mean, you can't have high expectations for the Texans. I think the Vegas books might have them as the team projected right now to be the worst team in the league. And obviously we know why. Like, we know the big elephant in the room there is Deshaun Watson. Assuming he's not playing for them, which sure seems likely this year. You have, Mark Ingram, David Johnson, Philip Lindsay. That's such a, how can you even begin to try to figure out what that will be? Like, you can
And
look
I
at
have
their
it
depth
pulled
chart.
up. They've got Rex Burkhead on the roster too.
Yeah, we know, like, get him 6 touches and he's got to go on IR, so we're not too worried about him. But
But why roster
but
him? Like, he, as a third running
it's
back,
so weird.
he could be there. But like as a fourth, it just has me thinking
I don't know
like,
what they're doing in Houston.
no, that's what has me. I think that's my current favorite for the Ravens situation. It's a glaring thing to me where it's like I feel like one of those guys should be somewhere else. I feel like the Texans should be trying to get something to help their team elsewhere.
I agree. And maybe that's what we see. And then, honestly, I'm not too concerned with Rex Burke. If Ingram, between the top 3 there on that team, if one of them was to go, that would make me feel a little better. Even then, no, I don't want to fuck with it. Truly, I don't. Just because I think this is going to be a pretty bad team, like most people do. And you have a backfield that could be a 3-headed monster. That's what they're going into the season as. There's just no value there right now. We'll watch it. We'll see what happens. Maybe they pull a quick one on us and David Johnson just still ends up being the 15, 16 touch guy. And if so, even on a bad team, he's going to have some relevance. If Mark Ingram and him are splitting first, second, third down work between them, and then Philip Lindsay gets kind of sprinkled in, it's just going to be an absolute mess that nobody's going to want to deal with.
Oh, terrible.
It's so weird.
Houston's a pretty interesting team for as low of expectations as we have for their win-loss record. Their running back room is loaded. There is one thing that stands out to me here. I have been it's not something that I've been like obsessing over, but definitely something that I've wanted to be aware of, and I'm seeing on the depth chart here. So we know they have Brandon Cooks. They traded for Anthony Miller. They also have Chris Conley, who at the very least is a vet. But what's standing out to me is they've got Nico Collins listed as wide receiver 2 on the depth chart, ahead of Chris Conley, and I think implying that he's going to be an outside guy. I don't think that they view him ahead of Anthony Miller right now, who's listed as wide receiver 3. I think that's more of like a outside versus slot role.
Yeah.
But Nico Collins is currently listed ahead of Chris Conley, and nobody's really talked about him. Is that wide receiver depth that we've seen in the last couple drafts? Do we think that Nico Collins has a role on this team?
I think he has. I do believe in the idea that he does have a legitimate role. I just don't think that role is going to be worth a whole lot. Because at the end of the day, you're relying on Tyrod Taylor, right? That's what we assume. That's who we assume is going to be the quarterback for this team this year and for the entire season. If there's one wide receiver you should be interested in on a team, it'd be Brandon Cooks, right? Because he's proven. You certainly wouldn't in any world want to take a Nico Collins over him. And there's no interest in Brandon Cooks. Like, nobody wants him, right? I don't know what his ADP is. I know it's very low. Eventually someone takes him. But no one's taking Brandon Cooks and feeling at all good about it. So you can't look at the wide receiver 2 and feel any better. But to answer your question, yes, I do think he legitimately is on the field now. Like, he does have a real role there.
It's interesting because I'm okay with getting quarterbacks and or receivers on bad teams because they typically have more opportunity in the passing game as far as volume goes. But, well, before the but, Nico Collins also profiles as a contested catch guy. He's somebody that I would be more trusting of if you needed to get the ball out to somebody than maybe the other guys that I'm seeing here. I think Brandon Cooks would be better at getting open, but I think that Nico Collins might be a better jump ball, deep, like go a one-on-one situation. What do they call them? 50-50 balls. But
Yeah, to go up and get it.
yeah, and then my but is Tyrod Taylor. Like
Exactly.
that's it. That's
Exactly.
so like I think they're gonna have to throw the ball. I think that in a lot of situations you don't shy away from the passing game on a bad team. But Tyrod Taylor is his profile is game manager. His profile is to play it safe and to keep drives alive and to try to move the chain slow and steady. He is not going to be the guy throwing 50-50 balls. He is not going to be the guy letting Collins air it out deep. Like, no. I like Nico Collins. We're both Michigan fans. I find it intriguing that he found a team where he does have a role this early that hasn't been talked about at all. But I also totally agree.
That on its own is certainly a surprise.
Well,
Didn't
if I
expect that.
remember right, he opted out last year, right? Like he was a good college receiver.
I think that might be right. Yeah.
I think he opted
Yeah.
out last college season, but good receiver, NFL build. He's a big guy. He does have some attributes that are desirable. Um, so if
And the
something
NFL has
happens,
proven to get more use out of out of Michigan receivers than even Michigan has. I mean, look at Peoples Jones over in Cleveland.
fact, fact. Um, so you bring up Tyrod Taylor. I agree. I think we should be expecting that he is the quarterback. I think you evaluate that team assuming that Tyrod Taylor will be the guy. But
Mhm.
what does that mean for Deshaun Watson? There's been some rumors.
God, I don't know, man. This is such a weird one too. Like the latest rumor that seems like it actually has maybe some truth to it, maybe, is the Miami Dolphins. I don't know. Is that even true? Is that just like some shit that's been thrown out there by somebody for a different motivation? I don't know. But Deshaun Watson, it, supposedly the Miami front office is very interested in Deshaun Watson,
And
which would mean,
sorry.
yeah, go ahead. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, I remember them being interested from day one. Like when the Deshaun Watson wanting a trade and the Russell Wilson wanting a trade thing were happening around the same time. Like Miami wanted that then. I don't know what that might mean now, but they've been interested.
Yeah, I think what's weird about I mean Deshaun Watson, what do you think I'd have to have the quarterbacks in front of me, but like top 6? Is he top 6 quarterback in the league? He's very good. He's proven to be very
For
good.
well, I guess it's probably pretty close to the same for me anyway. But I hesitated because I was wondering if you meant like for fantasy or for standing football
Real
standings.
football. Just real football stance.
Dude's a gamer, man. Like probably top 4 or 5 for me for that because he is willing
Yeah.
to get out into space, make some plays. Like I think he wants to
One of the
win.
He's what your team, your franchise hopes to get in a draft, right? Like you want a quarterback who's very like as good as a Deshaun Watson is. You'd be very happy with that. So of course I would understand why almost every team in the league would want Deshaun Watson on their team. It's just a little weird because you have all these accusations and we do not know how this is going to play out. He could at any moment be in legal trouble, get suspended, put on the exempt list, and the Texans are asking the house for him. So you're going to give up a lot of draft capital just to get him to take that risk. Then on top of that, the Miami situation, you have a quarterback you just drafted, and there was a lot of different things that Tua had to overcome last year. Not just a COVID season with no training camp and such, but also that very serious injury he had, which was the reason why he slipped in drafts in the first place. And now you have this season and preseason where it's preseason, so of course you're taking everything with a grain of salt, but he was out there with the ones and he was going against other teams' ones in preseason for those few drives they would have here and there. And he looked night and day different to me. He looked so much better to me. And you bring Waddle in from Alabama, who he has that rapport with. It almost felt like they did that in part because of that reason. So it just seems really, really weird to me. Like it seems like Miami could be one of those teams that would be in a position where they don't need to do that. But maybe it's just like a, hey, this is Deshaun Watson we're talking about, and maybe they just checked on the price just to see, what do you guys want for him exactly? I don't know.
It's
But all these
definite.
other teams have been interested, and then they backed out because of the asking price, I presume.
The asking price is way too high for his current situation, for sure. Um, Tua has looked better this year. I think. I mean, like Deshaun Watson is still an upgrade, and he's still young. I don't know that we say the same thing in a couple years. Maybe Tua, catches up. We don't know what the future might hold, but
Yeah.
interesting for me because it's kind of a. I can't think of what you would call it. It's kind of like a. It's I can't think of the phrase that I'm trying to use, but it's oxymoron. That's what I'm looking for. Deshaun Watson, Miami being interested in Deshaun Watson to me is an oxymoron because pursuing someone like Deshaun Watson for Miami would make sense to me in the fact that they should be trying to win now. That defense looks good. Xavier Howard demanded a trade this offseason, and they fixed that.
Saw that.
He's staying.
Yeah, they did.
But like they're to me as a GM
Yeah,
or an
I
owner, I'd
agree
be
with
having some concerns with how long I can keep this group together because of things like that. So it's like, okay, well, going and getting Deshaun if you knew he was going to play this entire season and or next season, like makes a lot of sense. He's 25. So if you don't think he's playing this year or next year, there's also could have him for a very long time once the dust settles on these allegations, and that also makes sense to me, but not for Miami. If Watson could miss time, a decent amount of time, that isn't something Miami should be signing up for. Do
Yeah,
you?
they do feel like a team that has a lot of expectation. Not maybe not a lot, but they've got some expectation this year because of the way that defense looked last year and the amount of offensive weapons they have with Tua in his second year now. I agree with you. They feel like a team that like for them to have a losing season would feel very disappointing. Like they certainly have expectation to win.
Yeah, I mean they were right around. I want to say they were right around 500 last year. They added Waddle. They added Fuller in free agency. Um, Kind of adds another element to the Watson thing if Fuller's there. Kind of
Well,
interesting.
supposedly that's why Watson had interest in Miami because I guess he has a no trade clause.
Oh, so he's like, well, I could hook back up with my boy,
Right.
stay in the warm weather. Do you think
Coming across as a bit of a bitch.
if you signed Deshaun Watson at 25 years
Hmm.
old, Tua's done so. So do you think that the asking price, because I think it was like 2 firsts and a couple seconds or something, Houston was getting crazy. Do you think if Miami floats Tua back to the Texans, like the price comes down quite a bit? Do you think maybe it's like
And
Tua and a first?
in my mind, I maybe this is me thinking crazy, but if that was a legitimate, real conversation between those teams, in my mind, that's what made sense. I mean, why would you bring Watson in at his age? Like you're committing to him long term, especially when you're giving up that much. Why would you do that and then have Tua on your roster? That doesn't make sense to me.
Yeah.
So to me, I thought it would be a quarterback swap with some picks.
Which, if
But
I
we
were
don't know
Houston,
what Texas thinks of Tua. Maybe Houston's looking at Tua like, nah, fam, we're good. Like I don't know.
they could
Maybe they don't
be.
want him.
I think if I'm the Texans after all of the Bill O'Brien stuff, like I would be interested in initiating a new legacy. But if Tua's not the guy you want to do that with, that's fair. I mean, I would
Right.
have more interest in like a new young quarterback in a rebuild,
Well,
really.
it's all about these teams' personal evaluations and and the system they like to run at the end of the day, right? Like all that matters to them is their own opinion of a player. So they could look at a Tua and not be sold on him, and then because of that, not have interest. It could be as simple as that. But I think if you're on Miami side and you actually wanted to pursue Deshaun, I think you're 100% offering up your quarterback.
Yeah,
You know,
agreed. You have to.
I think so.
Cam,
Yes.
you have been very keen on the Dolphins' skill players from top to bottom. at separate times heard you touch on almost all of them. What do you think happens with Miami's offense as is? What do you think? How do you think that might be affected if they were to add Deshaun Watson? I mean, like, what are you doing with Miami's team, fantasy wise or otherwise? Just, I guess, what's your general take on how Miami might be affected with Deshaun Watson, or maybe if they end up with riding along with Tua? Like, what's your expectation?
I think if you add Watson, that elevates every part of your game. That elevates your team wins. That elevates your fantasy value. He's just way more of a playmaker. I think Tua is the exact wannabe of a Watson. Um, I think that Miles Gaskin even, I like Gaskin. I don't think he's the greatest running back. I think he's getting not the appreciation that he should get. Um, but I think that even if Watson did go there, that elevates Gaskin too. I mean, look at what Watson did with Houston. I mean, and look what Houston's doing without Watson right now. I mean, they went from a playoff contending team to possibly the worst team in the league, like you said. So I think that if Miami does get him, I mean that's nothing but good news for all of them.
Who do you
But
think is the biggest beneficiary?
biggest,
Yeah, who goes
oof,
who are you bumping up the most if Deshaun Watson?
Will Fuller.
I was I was thinking Will Fuller, but I don't know. I think honestly, I think either Waddle or Gesicki. I think Gesicki is that much better if Watson gets there because he does. I mean, Gesicki is basically like their wannabe like Darren Waller. Like he does it all a little bit, but he can line up outside a little bit more and still run routes. Um, but I think Waddle being the little speedster, if they run him in like the slot area, especially, run it underneath and stuff like that, I think that Watson can create plays to where he'll spread the defense out a little bit more and get more open. I mean,
Waddle
what is
could be
what?
nasty with Deshaun Watson because
Yeah,
remember, like Kiki Kuti, he was primarily a slot guy, right, in Houston,
Yeah.
he wasn't known for
and
anything, and Watson just made him a name.
and yeah, and he targeted him enough that he made him relevant in the
Yeah,
slot primarily. And
100%.
you got Waddle speed with, like you said, like with Watson's ability to be mobile and extend plays.
Yeah, so
Oof.
I think Waddle overall would be the best benefit if Watson came there. Would be Waddle.
Okay. Yeah, I could see that. I like the Fuller pick too. We have all been aware that Fuller is suspended, but I don't know that we've touched on how long. So I pulled Will Fuller's
The game.
profile up here. Yeah, he's supposed to be ready week 2.
Yeah.
So that he could have a bigger impact than I think I've been counting on. I think if Deshaun Watson's there, I'm bumping up Will Fuller quite a bit. I think Waddle would be my most intriguing option with Tua for the reunion. It might just be more of like a Hollywood kind of a thing for me, but like I think that there could be some chemistry that helps him. But I think they could both really benefit from Deshaun Watson. In case anyone forgot, I'm just this his stat line happens to be here too. Before Will Fuller missed time last year, he played 11 games. 5 of those he went for over 100 yards and he had 8 touchdowns. We had previously seen him as like a deep threat, and he was very good at that. And then last year he like flipped a switch, kind of like Robbie Anderson. I give Robbie Anderson all the credit in the world for doing it, but Will Fuller did the same thing. He completed his route tree. He was running underneath. He was taking a lot of contact on shorter yard routes, and his volume went up, his consistency went up, and he was a very good receiver. I think missing some time makes it kind of hard to remember, but like he was pretty solid. I
He
don't
was
know if he'll be
really.
good without PEDs,
I
but
was gonna say. I mean, the juice helps. We'll see how long he can stay on the field. Um, unless him and his doctor found a new concoction,
yeah, the next new one.
which is very possible. But he was he was doing so good last year that Brandon Cooks season was just being completely ignored, and he was having a really rock solid season too. And it was because of Will Fuller. Like Will Fuller was crushing it.
He seemed to be like a clear number one. Like not just for that team, but like he just looked like a guy.
Mm-hmm.
It was
Yep.
interesting. Another guy that we have wrote down here, Michael Thomas, officially pup listed.
Yep. Pub listed. He's gonna be. I'm still a bit confused to be honest, but I think he is ineligible to return for the first 6 games. When is the Saints bye week? Does that put him out even another week? Because of a like where I'd have to look at the roster. But the report I'm reading says that would make him ineligible to return before week 8. Switch. I mean, we kind of already knew he was going to be out, right? But that just sort of confirms it and gives you an idea of what you're signing up for if you're going to still get a Michael Thomas in your draft. I don't know what
Their bye week is week 6.
Week 6. Okay. So I don't even know what would be the appropriate round to want to take a guy like that. I guess ultimately that's just going to be what the individual is comfortable with. I don't know if you guys have something in your mind, but for me, it's probably got to be late enough that I'm just not going to get him. That'd be my assumption anyway. It does though just sort of give me. I already had some confidence in taking like a Marquez Callaway, but it just sort of solidifies for me now that it's official that I really think people should be drafting that guy towards the end of their drafts. It could end up being a nothing, could just be a flash in the pan. But when we're talking about the end of drafts, like what are you really risking? What you should be trying to do is find guys that can not just be there as a fill-in, but somebody who could actually break into your starting lineup because they're really producing at that level. So to me, like a Marquez Callaway, that's just I said it last week, I think it was, but I'll mention him again. Like he should be somebody everybody's aware of and trying to target, I think.
I think
Unless of course you go super wide receiver heavy in the beginning half of your drafts. But then at that point, make sure you get some of those RBs.
for sure. I think knowing that the bye week is week 6 means to me that if you're the guy sitting there with like 15 seconds or 10 seconds left on your pick and you're staring at Michael Thomas and you're like, man, do I do it or don't I do it? Like, if you're that close to taking him, one of those weeks is going to be the bye week, right? So, like, you don't have to lose. The loss of the pup list isn't as big of a hit. I would consider it more of like a tiebreaker. If you're like still considering taking this guy with, like I said, 10 seconds left on the clock, I might just click it. But
It's
overall,
so hard
I'm
not
very
to.
hesitant. Very hesitant. I think I might be in that same territory where it's like probably gonna miss out on him because other people are looking at that upside. Um, it's I mean, Jameis Winston can be good. He can he can get the ball to receivers. I don't know that the style is a great fit up. I think we have already touched on that anyway, but that is enough to create some hesitation for me and then missing some time too. It's just a big investment. It's a
Not
big
knowing what
investment.
just because he's on a pup list and can come back after 6 games, that's not telling you where he will be physically after that period of time. You don't have any indication of that. Is he just going to be right back to 100%? He's just going to pop him right back on the field and he's going to be ready to roll right away? I don't know. That seems somewhat unlikely. Maybe that's the case. It's not usually how it works for guys. And then yeah, like you said, we've already talked about it before, but this is not Drew Brees pinpoint accuracy, short intermediate stuff. This is Jameis Winston. So we don't know how that dynamic's going to work either.
Which
Could look
profiles
stupid
better for Marquez Callaway anyway that you can get for nothing.
based on the little bit that we've seen in preseason. It does. So I don't know. That could be one of those you look back at the end of the year and somebody got an absolute steal from Michael Thomas and he ends up being part of the reason why you are able to get over the hump and win a fantasy championship because of how talented we know he is. Or it could be a total waste of a pick. you know? I don't know that there's going to be much of an in between.
No, no, you're probably it is one of the more volatile picks. Um, there are a couple that stand out to me. Some of it's related to injury, but like there are some people that are at the ADP that they currently are for upside only, and I think Michael Thomas is one of them. I think there's a change in circumstance, but I also think everyone knows what he is capable of or what his ceiling could be as a player. And so for me, interest in Michael Thomas at his current ADP is almost only based on his ceiling. And if he doesn't hit
Oh
that,
yeah.
if it goes the other way, then you could have had a pretty nice player at that spot in the draft.
Well, yeah, that's the thing. It'd be different if you were talking about somebody that's going to be the second player on your bench, but we're not talking about that. Like he's going in a range where you can draft another starter on your team, so you're really you're burning pretty high draft capital for that. So I don't know, man. That's a very tough one. Like you said, if you're one of those players, if you're one of those fantasy players that loves to take on a lot of risk for all that upside, I can appreciate that. And then Michael Thomas is probably your guy. you know,
Yeah. Another guy that could have some value, Cam. I know you said you saw that I believe we were talking about the same guy. Had some flashes in the preseason. Adam Troutman, I'm seeing here that he had a leg injury. They carted him off actually last week, and they're saying that it's pretty minor. He could miss week one, but otherwise not a doesn't seem to be a very big deal. It's also saying here Nick Vanette, who got some time with Seattle, I remember, is a solid fill-in tight end. He's actually out for 2 to 4 weeks. So if Troutman's playing early and you're seeing some things out of him in the preseason, are you feeling maybe a little better about it now that he's like the only guy? Maybe he's not going to be sharing any time with Van Ness. Does it change anything for you?
what did you say he is going to be ready for the start of the season?
Troutman, it says, is in danger of missing week one. So it sounds like he still could play week one.
On the fence there.
Yeah. But to me, I guess I'd be expecting him to play week two if they're phrasing it that way.
I would have some interest if by week 2 he was in. I would have some interest personally.
I mean, with Jameis, with any player, I kind of try to look at what their tendencies might be. And I know that Jameis had Cameron Brate and OJ Howard in Tampa, and it was all about Mike Evans and Chris Godwin were getting the hype. But OJ Howard and Cameron Brate had some moments too. Like Cameron Brate was startable as a tight end pretty regularly for them with Jameis Winston. So I think tight end does have some value there. I think especially if you're looking at like later picks and maybe there's some guys that you don't feel great about. I think this
Mhm.
could be one of the safer options, but I think if you're drafting that late, you're probably leaning more towards upside. But if you're seeing some things, I like to trust my eyes. And if you're seeing Troutman playing well, if you're seeing him, getting some looks and he's looking good on the field, I mean, it might be worth investing in late and seeing what you end up with.
It would be. Just like there's, especially now that like we talked about Irv Smith earlier, guys like that are sort of out of the picture for now, it would seem. So there's becoming less and less of those like super late flyer tight ends. I was kind of putting Troutman in that mentally. I was putting Troutman in that group too because I just assumed he was not going to be playing. But if he is going to be back out there, if that injury was not as serious as it seemed in the beginning, then yeah, I don't know if I would draft him. It depended on how deep of a league I was in. But I probably am not drafting him in like a 10, 12 team league. But he is another guy that I would watch for. Peyton, obviously, he's used tight ends in the past. And then and like you said, with Winston, he has done that in the past with Tampa Bay. There were two relevant tight ends at one point with Winston and Tampa Bay. So it would all make sense. And then, like you said, trusting your eyes. Troutman played very little last year, didn't play a whole lot, but I know he's a pretty talented tight end. He's not just a blocker. So I'd pay attention to it, but I kind of feel that way with it's the tight end position, man. Like I'm willing to take a risk with a lot of guys there just to see what you have, and if it doesn't work, you move on to someone else.
Oh, for sure. I mean, there's a beauty in it. So, like, I think for me, the group of interesting tight ends usually is about 5 or 6 guys, and then after that, it's kind of same difference. I've just always personally felt that way. Obviously, you have like your Kelsey, and then you have your Waller, your Kittle, um, Hawkinson, and Pitts are kind of in that next tier for me. I think Hawkinson has earned some respect, and Pitts has all the hype right now. So you've got
You have
that.
Andrews there that you could consider putting with those guys too.
Yep,
If not, you would put him right behind him. But I mean, to me, he's in with those two others.
yep, yep. Mark Andrews, that's a good fit for that tier too. But then after that, for me, um, you're looking at some guys that you're not going to be thrilled about anyway. And there is almost this sense of relief if you throw the position because you can go get another guy that was evaluated around the same spot. Like, I think if I'm not getting one of those 6 guys, then I'm like, okay, I'm probably going to be more inclined to throw the position, take my shot on the, you know, Logan Thomas is going later than I think he probably should, but you've got Logan Thomas, Mike Gesicki, you have your Troutman, Hunter Henry, like they're each of those guys is interesting in their own right to me for that position. And if you miss, that's the beauty of it. If you miss on it, go get the other one of those other guys that wasn't drafted. They're like I think there's interest for me in all of those guys. I feel better about Gesicki and Thomas. I'm not trying to put all those guys in the same category, but they're all being drafted so late that if you throw, I think you do get a chance for Gesicki or Thomas to fall into your lap for nothing. And if not, then you just have the situation, this fluid situation where you can go get another guy if it doesn't work out.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I totally agree, and that's how I've been approaching every mock draft we do. That's how I approach it.
Well, I did that one that was I went no quarterback, no tight end, and it felt really weird. And then I ended up with Joe Burrow and Hunter Henry. And when I was kind of comparing that with what my bench looked like and what some of my trade prospects could be, I actually felt pretty good about it.
Yeah, I mean, it's 2 more draft spots. I mean, you think if you take a Hawkinson, Pitts, Mark Andrews, these are what I mean. Pitts sometimes goes as early as the 4th round right now. Crazy to me, but I mean, I understand why people are convincing themselves to do it. I just don't agree with it. But 4th, 5th, 6th round, if you want one of those guys, like you're looking in that range, and then the same goes for your upper tier quarterbacks. So that's 2 rounds in those like first 6. Let's even call it 7. There are very legitimate wide receiver options, even at the bottom end of that, and then there's still very legitimate running back options at the top of that range. So you could load up on that, and then all of a sudden, your last bench player is a guy you still like quite a bit, and then you're just sitting there looking at your tight end and your quarterback, and at the very end, and that's just something you have to be comfortable with doing. But like you said, you can get a Burrow and whatever tight end that's at the bottom that you like, and you could feel okay with that. And the beauty about it too, like you said, is you're gonna be okay if not, because those positions are going to be available on the waiver wire, especially quarterback and tight end. Tight end is going to be kind of tough, but it's going to be tough for most teams anyway. And when you have such a deeper bench and you have such better options even at your flex, that is also an advantage too. Just like them having a better tight end is an advantage, you having a deeper team and a better flex option is also an advantage.
Oh yeah.
Injuries are going to happen.
Well, and it can don't invest in this, but it can also create some trade opportunities when you have guys on your bench that other teams wish they could be starting. Like it almost could create a need for you too if you're taking an extra receiver, running back, or 2 of either. And like other teams are going to be looking like who has some extra guys. Oh, well, this guy is loaded at receiver and running back. I really need one, and then that market comes to you on its own. It also allows you to kind of make your price to a certain extent. You have a little more pull in the conversation. There's a lot of opportunity that can come from that, and really, like, throwing that tight end position means you have access to like 3 to 5 guys that have some upside anyway. So, I mean, really, yeah, it's definitely got some play. It's definitely something that can help your team, and it feels a lot better than taking someone you're not fond of.
Yeah, or feeling like you need to reach on that fifth tight end because he's the last one you like, but you don't want to take him that early because you really like that running back or that wide receiver, but you take that tight end anyway. Like that's never something I do, and I would never recommend doing.
No.
Oh, Pitts and Hawkinson just went, and they both went in the fifth. I didn't expect that, and I'm at the end of the fifth. Well, I better grab Andrews now. like, don't do that. I don't think. I don't think. I mean, if you want to do that, and you're just playing fantasy to have fun, and you don't want to, you just want certain players on your roster. By all means, do whatever the hell you want. But that's not the way you win in fantasy football.
No. No, you got to take. If you're reaching and you're ending up with a roster full of guys that you feel good about, you're winning. There are going to be guys that you don't feel good about for one reason or another in the middle rounds, and quite often you're not going to feel better about them midseason. Like that just there's a reason why some of those guys fall. There's a reason why you don't have interest in them, even if you can't put it into words. Like trust your gut. If you're looking at the list of position players, we were talking about tight end, but if it's any position, receiver, running back, quarterback, anything, and you're like, man, I really need one of those guys for my lineup, but I'm not feeling any of it, pass. The worst thing you can do is have a guy that you don't feel good about.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's why I like saving tight end, and we can wrap it up after this, but that's why I like saving too. If I can't get one of those top tight ends, for instance, that's why I like kind of waiting on it a little bit, because when I do reach around where I don't love any of the running backs, I don't love any of the receivers, I think there's some guys that are later that I am just as fine having as the guys that are at the top of the board at that time at those positions, then that's usually when I will be like, okay, I will now use this round to take one of these tight ends. And I don't care where they're projected to go. If I flip it over to the tight end position and, like, I don't know, let's call it the 9th round, and it's like, okay, there's Gesicki, for instance, and I'm fine with having him, and I don't care for any of these other guys so much, these other positions. Well, now's the time I'll grab them, and that's how I would approach it. I think that's the right way to approach it.
Yeah, yeah. I think if you're drafting with the intentions of winning your league, you're probably going to miss out on a guy or two that you would have liked to have had. Um, it's not ideal, but I also think that if you're really going for upside, you're passing on a situation when you feel like it might be a little too early. And unfortunately, that could open the door for that person to get taken before your next pick or whenever you're comfortable taking them.
Oh yeah.
But you're never going to have someone fall to you if you don't allow it either. Like there are going to be guys in every draft that you're going to be higher on than the rest of the league. And if you talk yourself into taking them around earlier than their ADP because you really like them, that's fine, because if you need to have someone, you need to go get them. But just know that that person's not going to fall to you, guaranteed, if you're taking him around ahead of the ADP too. So it's an interesting thing. I mean, we all have our preferences, but yeah. I mean, I don't think investing in a situation you don't feel great about is a good idea. And there's a chance that you could get that guy. It happens all the time, like a round or 2 rounds later, and then you're winning. Like that's a big win.
That's when it feels great.
Yeah, that's when you feel like you're fleecing the league. You're like
Yeah.
posting in the chat after, like, bro, I just won the championship. You guys are fucking stupid. Well,
Yeah.
I mean that's pretty much what we had. There's definitely some relevant stuff. I guess just to recap, Cam Newton got cut. He could end up finding a place to play later, or a place to play somewhere else. Mac Jones is the guy in New England. which has an impact on some of the skill players there, which I think is the consensus is a positive impact on the skill players there, mostly Damien Harris, right?
Yeah, I think so.
We got Saquon Barkley. We kind of touched on what we're doing with him with his current situation. Little bit of other kind of mild rumor stuff and some the Damian Williams and the Chris Herndon thing. Those I think were important for fantasy with where Montgomery's going or where you may be evaluating him, and also Chris Herndon, potential impact on Irv Smith, who could have been a really nice late round tight end for you.
Yeah, this preseason sucks.
Josh has had it a little rough. We're in a 3-keeper league. We haven't even drafted yet. We like to draft very late because of that. But Cam Akers went down. That was his keeper. And then J.K. Dobbins happened. That was his alternative keeper. So he's really going through it right now. But
Smith late round sneaky tight end. Oh yeah, I see you, bud.
but I mean, you did hedge some of that with you made a nice little trade there. You added Keenan Allen for relatively low cost. He could be a big piece. I mean, he had a good year last year and he's been good for a long time.
Yeah, I mean, I'm happy to have him as a third keeper, especially for the price I paid. But I just sure hope this is not a sign of things to come for me this year. Oh, I tell you what, if so, I'm selling the whole team, boys. I'm selling everybody early.
Listen, I just need to know if you plan on making like any significant sacrifice to the fantasy gods. Like, I kind of want to either have that on recording or like just be there for it. I don't know what that would. Yeah, like if you're doing some like tribal dances out in the yard or burning some sage or something, like I need to know that that's a thing.
I'm not above it. That's what it takes. Yeah. And if I'm selling Mahomes, I'll reach out to you first with that Tyreek stack.
Listen, if I'm stacking Tyreek Hill with Patrick Mahomes, that league's over. So I mean, like if you're feeling like your odds are waning, like you just send him over to me and it'll be over.
Oh, look, if I'm going down, I'm bringing as many other teams down with me, so as I can. So.
You know, if you're giving him Mahomes, man, I would like some Hopkins on my team for a little stack. I mean, I don't know why I'm left out here, but you know, I got Kyler.
Listen, we'll talk in like week 4, okay? You guys just better hope both of them don't die before then, because that's where we're headed.
Yeah, I mean, it might just be a bad idea to invest in players that would be affected by Josh's roster at this point. Like, maybe I should be selling high on Tyreek Hill right now.
No shit.
Well, all right, boys. I think we covered what was available for us. Is there anything else you guys want to touch on?
I think we've pretty much everything that's been relevant in the last couple of days, a few days. I think we've pretty much touched on. So I'm just looking forward to freaking football season, man, so we can get to talking about waivers and the games that week, trades that we're gonna make in our league that we get to trash people for. Like, I'm looking forward to all of it.
Oh yeah. It's coming quick, man. We got a week and a half?
Something like that, yeah.
Week and 2 days.
Sunday, baby.
Yes, sir.
Football is back. Well, all right. We're gonna get out of here, but we definitely appreciate you stopping by, hanging out with us. Any questions you have, we do on Twitch have like a open chat on our page, so feel free to leave anything there if you have any questions or anything you want us to respond to. I think we're on there like every day, so you should have some updates. We stream. We got our schedule posted here. We do stream on Tuesdays and Sundays. It says Sundays 10:30 to 12:30. I imagine we're probably still going to do one more night stream on next Sunday. But then the plan going forward will be leading up to the game Sunday mornings. So Tuesday nights, one more Sunday night, and then Sunday mornings after that. Definitely stop by. Let us know what you're thinking. Hit that follow button if you're on Twitch. Hit that subscribe. Put your alerts on. That way you can keep up with what we have to offer and give us some feedback. But we definitely appreciate your time and hope to see you again.